Hey everyone, in this video we'll show you how to install a high-performance Rockford Fosgate audio system on this Harley-Davidson motorcycle. Welcome back, I'm Eric, and today we're going to install an HD 14 RGSG Stage 3 on this Road Glide. The first thing we need to do is make sure we have the bike flashed by an authorized Rockford Fosgate dealer. Now we have a list of these dealers that can flash on our website. The factory radio contains an excessive EQ curve that's preset by the factory. Now this is fine for the factory setup, but with the high performance aftermarket system, we need to get rid of that EQ curve. This will allow you to experience the full potential of the audio system. Now we'll get started by removing the seat using a number 2 screwdriver and a 10mm socket to disconnect the battery negative. Okay, now we're ready to remove the fairing. First, we'll install the service cover on our fender. We'll use a 3/16 Allen driver to remove a screw from each marker light, then a T25 Torx driver to remove 4 bolts on the inner side of the fairing. Next, we'll use a number 2 Phillips and remove 4 screws holding the visor and upper fairing in place. Once we pull this off, we'll disconnect 2 small harnesses. Then we'll use a small nylon pry tool or your finger to pop out the speaker grills from behind. At this step, it's best to have 2 people, one to hold the fairing in position and the other to remove the screws. So to do that, you'll use a 5/32 Allen to remove those last 2 screws that are located near the speakers. Once we pull down the fairing, we'll disconnect any harnesses and remove it. Okay, now we're ready to remove the factory equipment and install our new speakers. The TMS65 speakers included in your kit contain extra grills for Street Glide and Tour Pack installs. For our shark nose fairing, we're going to use this wave style grill. We'll start by using a T25 Torx and remove 4 screws that hold the factory speaker. Then disconnect the wiring harness. Now we'll use the same hardware to secure our new speakers in place. The white terminal is positive and the black terminal is negative. Take note when installing, the speaker is keyed for fitment, so align the logo to the bottom. Okay, now that we have that done, we're ready to remove the gas tank. We'll start off by disconnecting the electrical harness and pulling the 2 breather lines in the back. Note that they may be zip tied underneath. Next, we'll disconnect the gas line. Push up on the hose and while sliding the fitting upward, pull down on the gas line. Once that's done, we'll detach the 2 rubber boots from both sides of the front of the gas tank and use a 1/2-inch socket to remove those 2 bolts. Then we'll go to the back of the gas tank and remove the 2 bolts using the same socket. Before we proceed, we need to remove the headlight. First, disconnect 2 harnesses that attach at the top of the headlight. Then, using a 3/16 Allen wrench, remove 4 screws that hold it in place. Then pull out the headlight and disconnect the harness. Now we're ready to install our power harness. First, cut any zip ties off and unsnap the center harness cover. Then we'll take our harness with the power connector side and run it up to the clutch side of the motorcycle. We'll then use a 9/16 wrench on one side and a 9/16 socket on the other side and unscrew the nut that holds a retaining bracket in place in between the forks. Make sure not to remove the bolt as this holds the bottom of our fairing in place. We'll route our harness through this bracket and up to the headlight area. We're making good progress, which leads us to installing our T-harness. First, we'll disconnect the main harness from the back of the factory source unit. Push the little catch pin in that locks the harness in place and slide the lever open. Plug that end into the female end of our T-harness. Then plug the male end of our T-harness into the source unit, slide the lever until you hear it click. Now we're ready to prep our amp bracket. First, position the bracket on the heatsink with the Diamond R logo and the flaps facing the same way. Then, use a 2mm Allen wrench to secure 4 flush mount screws into the amp plate labeled 2015 Plus Road Glide. Once that's done, remove the power connector from the amplifier since our power harness already has one installed. Then, position the amplifier with the logo sitting between the flaps on the bracket. Use a 2.5mm Allen and 4 provided screws to secure the amp to the heatsink. Now that we're done with that, we're ready to tune our amplifier and install it. Now you'll need to plug in the inputs and tune before proceeding. We offer this free amp tuning guide that's available in the description of this video and through the kit's product details page at rockfordfosgate.com. Now, prepare the amplifier by taking the harness labeled amp input and plug them into the corresponding front and rear inputs of the amplifier. Then, flip the amplifier assembly over. Now this lip slides in between the radio and the radio bracket when it goes up underneath. Then we'll use a 5/16 wrench and socket to secure the flaps to the underside of the factory radio bracket using the supplied nuts and bolts. Now that we're done with that, we're ready to install our bag lid speakers. We're going to remove a bag to make sure it's easier for you to see the process on camera. With our new kit, it's actually easy to perform this task on the motorcycle and doesn't require you to remove any hardware. Alright, we're ready to prepare our bag lids for speaker installation. We designed this template to assist you in making the perfect cut. To get started, we're going to use some 3M blue masking tape to cover the entire top of the bag lid so we don't scratch the paint. Next, we'll position our template on top, making sure the front lip of the template is sitting firmly against the ridge of this bag lid. Make sure it's properly positioned with no play in the lid. Then, mark the 2 pilot holes on top. Remove the template and use a 1/8 inch bit to pre-drill the holes. Then secure the template in place using a number 2 Phillips and the small screws provided in the kit. Now that we have that done, we're going to use a 5/16 bit to drill our pilot holes. Then, using a jigsaw with a fine-toothed blade, follow along the template while staying within the guides. To maintain accuracy, do not cut the segments of the template until all the slots have been cut. Now, cutting into the template will lead to fitment issues, especially in the corners. Now, a wise installer once showed me a trick to use a bin liner inside the bag to catch all the debris. This will keep the interior nice and clean. Now that we have that done, we went ahead and cleaned up our cutouts, making sure that there were no burrs around the edges so that we could test fit our grill. So now we're ready to actually install the speakers. First, we'll open the bag lid, then position the mounting ring and grill into place to make sure they're properly aligned. The grill goes on the outside and our mounting ring on the inside. This is where we'll sandwich them together to the bag lid. Then, using a number 2 Phillips, secure 4 of the smaller screws supplied in the kit. Now be careful not to over tighten these. Once that's done, we'll align the speaker and basket protector assembly with the speaker terminals facing toward the rear of the bike. Then we'll secure it to the mounting ring from the inside using 4 long button head screws with the built-in washer. Now that we have our speakers installed, we're ready to wire them. First, remove both bags and service covers from the motorcycle. Then route the bag lid speaker harness up through the center channel through the same retaining bracket that we originally used for our power wire. Then pull the harness up to the amplifier and verify there's enough slack for connection to the amp's rear output. Then route the opposite ends of the harness down to the battery. Okay, you'll notice we removed both service panels so we could run our harness under the seat frame and back to the rear bag area. Our harness is labeled brake side and clutch side. The brake side can easily route through the service panel and exit toward the rear shock. On the clutch side, we'll use a 1/2-inch socket to slightly pull out the fuse panel and route our harness toward the rear belt. Now that we have our harness laid out, we're ready to drill our holes into our bags. We're measuring approximately 3.5 inches down from the front of the bag's quick release. On our motorcycle, it ensures that the harness is kept away from any moving parts. On your bike, this may vary slightly based on the belt on the clutch side and the brake calipers on the right side. We'll need a 3/4 inch hole for installation of the grommet. To get the hole started, we'll be using a drill bit, then switching up to a step-up bit to increase the hole to the appropriate size. Now we're ready to wire our bag lids. To get started, we'll position our bag in place and insert the grommet into the 3/4 inch hole. Once you have the grommet seated, finish securing the bag into place. Once that's done, use the pigtail harness included in the kit and connect the red wire to the positive terminal, marked with the red dot, and the black wire to the negative terminal. Then plug the pigtail into the main harness. We've included some zip ties, zip tie mounts, and retainer clips to keep your wiring out of the way. We've also included some replacement warning stickers for installation inside your bags. Now we're ready to make our final connections at the amplifier. Simply plug in the power connector into the amplifier and plug the blue wire into the empty connector on the top brake side. This blue wire is the amplifier's remote turn-on. Take note that there's likely an empty plug that needs to be removed before making your connection. Take the harness labeled amp output and connect the front into the amplifier's front output. Then take the bag lid speaker harness and connect it to the amplifier's corresponding rear output. Take note that we're not using the T-harness's rear speaker harness, so we'll just go ahead and zip tie this up. All right guys, we're in the final stretch and ready to make our battery connections. We'll disconnect a couple harnesses, then use a 1/2 inch socket to remove 2 screws that hold the engine control module tray in place. We'll flip the ECM up and make our positive terminal connection using a 10mm socket. Then we'll reconnect our negative cable along with our amp ground. Once that's done, we'll put everything back in place. Now that we have that done, we'll reinstall our headlight and clean up our wiring. we'll tuck in our T-harness into the left side and reattach our headlight. As you notice, we have some extra wires on our T-harness as well as supplied in the kit. Now these extra harnesses allow you to use our DSR1 digital signal processor. For more information, download our DSR1 setup guide for Harley-Davidson and keep an eye out for our complete configuration video we'll be releasing in the future. Alright, now we'll go ahead and finish reassembling the bike. You'll notice there are some additional adapters that came with your kit. In the current configuration that you see here, it supports rear bag lid speakers. Now these additional Y adapters allow you to add rear Torpack speakers and aftermarket lowers to the front. There are also extra hardware and bypass plugs that are not used on this motorcycle but are covered in other videos. Alright, now that we have the bike reassembled, we're ready to test the system. I want to reiterate, before doing this, make sure that the factory radio is flashed. Now we get a lot of questions about the maintenance of the system, and since the speakers are element ready, they can actually get wet. Just rinse them off and avoid using a pressure washer. As you can see, that install was pretty straightforward. If you prefer a professional do the install for you, we have a network of authorized Rockford Fosgate dealers that can be found on our website. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact our technical support. They can be reached Monday through Friday at 1-800-669-9899 or through live chat at the bottom of our website at rockfordfosgate.com. Until next time, I'm Eric, and we'll see you again soon.